Broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. Broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's WilmsFront featured interview show on this Thursday 6th of March 2025. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel. Now unfortunately it is not via the link that I sent out because there was some sort of glitch where when I pressed live it didn't work properly, so I've had to, it's on the WilmsFront channel but not on the link that I actually sent over. So I'll have to resend that out again shortly. Although the WilmsFront Rumble channel is working, and also tonight I am going to be streaming on the Unshackled Facebook page. That is because my first guest tonight is a prominent Facebook commentator. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. Now, throughout human history, individuals have sought to find meaning and purpose in something bigger than themselves. The most common form this has taken is religious faith. 80% of the world's current population follows a religion. Christianity has been the bedrock religion of Western civilization, which over its history has become made up of a number of organized denominations. Most members of organized religion live and interact with all of us in society, which makes them different from cults, which attempt to isolate their followers from the rest of society. How can we identify a cult even though many of them claim to be based on Christianity? And how can we help those who get sucked in? My guest tonight is Minny Jackson, who has researched the proliferation of cults in our society. She has been on WilmsFront before as Septimus Cain, which is still the name of her Telegram channel, but I will call her Minny tonight. She has a Juris Doctor law degree and is an activist for persecuted Christians. Minny, welcome back to WilmsFront.
Hi, Tim. It's really good to be back. It has been a few years since I've been on here, but thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was great to have you back, and apologies, I saw that you sent the YouTube link on your socials, which I'm grateful for. But as I'm not sure if you heard me in my introduction, it's all of a sudden not decided to work. So there's a fresh link there, which I'll send to you in the private chat.
I can
here.
edit that now, actually. Cool.
I find that on Telegram I can edit it, but not in the ones that I actually share, which is really annoying. This is the first time that I've had this problem, but never mind. If people are subscribed to the WilmsFront channel, they'll be able to watch this. If you can, a few of my subscribers have seen us here, the Flanello philosopher. We've got Andrew Nolan, so everyone's finding their way over. Thank you. Now, let's start with the definition of a cult. I gave, well, what's one of the signs of a cult in my introduction, that it attempts to isolate the individual from society and often their own family. Can you give us the definition of a cult, or what is your definition?
Okay. Well, a cult in general terms is there's always usually a power structure. So there's some hierarchy involved, and it's got to have a framework where it allows for narcissists to move up ranks, obtain power, manipulate people, abuse them. So there's always like a power structure there. So that's one defining thing. Obviously, though, not every framework with a power structure is a cult. Like you see churches with elders and whatever, that we wouldn't call that a cult. But in terms of identifying why something's like a criminal cult, well, some sort of criminal conduct has to be taking place as well. This can be hard to sometimes identify because of the nature with cults. A lot of people are very subtle in how they manipulate people. So if there is criminal conduct involved, it's very, very kind of insidious. You almost won't spot it unless you're really digging into it. And in criminal behavior, we're talking about things like trafficking, sometimes if it's a really dark cult, fraudulent conduct, money laundering, taking people's money, putting them in some kitty, and then you never see where that money's really truly going. So fraudulent conduct, money crimes, and sexual crimes in some deeper, darker cults like satanic ritual abuse, even stuff like that, if we're going to go into the dark stuff. But yeah, some criminal conduct, a power hierarchy, room for people to abuse those power relations, and a degree of secrecy, I'd say, as well, because the nature of what they're doing is quite criminal. Usually there'll be some level of hushing things up. So they might, tell members in this cult, don't proliferate that specific information, keep things very confidential about who's in this cult, who the leaders are, for example. So an element of secrecy as well is usually the defining kind of characteristic, I'd say. A lack of transparency. They keep kind of under the public radar.
Now, the cults that are most inseared into our popular culture and our history are the ones that have ended up in mass suicide or terrorism. So obviously there's Jim Jones, the People's Temple, but of course it didn't start with Jonestown and drinking the Kool-Aid. There were several decades of him setting up the congregation in San Francisco and actually becoming quite influential in San Francisco politics. And then there is the cult that died in the Waco siege, the Branch Davidians. And then they both based themselves off of Christianity. Then there was obviously Heaven's Gate, which was sort of a combination of Christianity, UFOlogy, Marshall Applewhite, which was a mass suicide as well. And then there's the cults that engage in terrorism, such as the Charles Manson's cult. Obviously, the murder of Sharon Tate and her friends, that was designed to start a race war. But there's many cults which have stood the test of time and haven't had this huge, devastating climax.
Yes. So some cults, they're not always outright, like big bad cults that you see on television where masses of people are being massacred or dying, or like you're saying, drinking the Kool-Aid and committing suicide and whatever. Cults come in many different forms. I'm finding the ones these days, they do, like you say, infiltrate Christian groups, a lot of them. I think for a couple of reasons, because some Christians can be extremely sheltered and gullible, actually, about the level of crime out there. They get sucked into Bible studies and that kind of thing. They might tithe to these people as well. So that's why a lot of cults target Christian groups or religious groups, because religious people generally, they're living by some moral order where, you want to help people, you want to give aid, you want to give tithes and finances and whatnot. So a lot of cults these days, even though they don't kill people outright, they might just take your money from you, drain you, drain members of the family, of members that are involved in this cult. And it's just like a contagion. They rope people in, and it's a money-making business. I'm finding a lot of cults these days, especially cults from South Korea and other places in the world, they're coming to rich countries, setting up, groups here and targeting unsuspecting civilians, getting them to tithe and just making money off that. I find that's one of the most common cults these days.
The South Korea, there's three prominent cults which will say that they're based on Christianity. And I'm not sure if you've watched the Netflix series, How to Become a Cult Leader. Obviously, it focuses on the ones I mentioned before, Charles Manson, Jim Jones, Marshall Applewhite. But the final episode it's titled Become Immortal, and is focused on the founder of the Unification Church in South Korea, Sun Myung Moon, or they're also known as the Moonies. So, but they've managed to, all of these South Korean cults that are based on Christianity have managed to go to other Western countries. And it's also known as, they all have, this is going to be a theme with what we're going to discuss. They all have these different names, such as the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity and Family Federation for World Peace and Unification.
Yeah, so I will say many of these people, like the ones you've mentioned, they are cults. Some people debate whether they're cults or not, because some people genuinely believe that these, that they're in a legitimate religious group. But for the sake of, this video, I'm going to call them a cult because I believe they are a cult. And yeah, they have different front names, oftentimes because when they're exposed too much and people start getting wind of what they're doing, they have to kind of go underground, maybe rename a few things, and then keep going and target other people who aren't going to know that they're actually part of these other groups. So there's a lot of renaming that goes on, like you say. But yeah, they have a lot of front groups. They start up like education centers, using names like Zion, or like Christian sort of slogany names like that. So it's very easy these days to get sucked into a cult just because you think you're going to a legitimate church. So you really have to dig deep into who these people actually are, their background, what religions they've come out of before, like what organizations they were affiliated with before they set up this other group that you came into. And you've got to kind of do research there. Otherwise, they're so prolific, it's unbelievable. Australia is like under a cult crisis at the moment. People are getting sucked in on campuses where they work, they're on the streets. I was approached the other day by someone where I am, so they're right around the country. If people walk up to you and say, join a Bible study, but you don't know who these people are and you don't know like who's organizing these events, if they have some weird Christian slogany name that they can't really tell you much more about this organization, they're a bit kind of secretive about it, you kind of know you're probably getting sucked into a cult. So just be aware of terms like Zion, education centers, and that sort of thing, because they'll use those types of names.
If I wanted to go to a Bible study, I'd ask for one recommended by you or my other Christian friends, such as Margot Huss. But you said that Christians, they can be gullible, naive, and that they just because they're already of the faith, and so they see these other Christians on the street. And is this also another thing why there's some who don't want to call the Unification Church, for example, a cult, because they don't want to make it seem like they're criticizing fellow Christians?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of the times people in these cults won't say they're actually part of these groups. Like they might be part of a cult group, but they won't say that's the organization they're part of. And because there is a level of, hang on a second, this person saying I'm in this cult or whatever, and people are going to be like, hang on, that's really weird. So they won't say that. They'll just invite you to a Bible study. So it's up to you to sort of dig into it. But yeah, like you're saying, if you wanted to do a Bible study or something, do it through mutual friends, existing people in the church that you can trust. Otherwise, you don't know who these randoms really are.
And often another defining feature of a cult is the devotion to the leader, and they claim that they have some sort of special connection with God, or that they're chosen by God. There, of course, is the to put it into more popular culture terms. I'm not sure if you've seen the Simpsons episode "Sect of Cult," but the chant is "No, no, 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 leader."
Is that like a Batman reference?
Yeah, that's when like all of Springfield joins this cult. That's what they're saying.
That's funny. Yeah, so just my experience with these cult people, they were on campuses. So I was approached like in shopping centers actually by a couple people, and this has happened more than once. And people just like ask you, do you want to be part of this Bible study? Or they'll ask you to sit down for coffee and say, I'm doing this marketing survey. Do you mind if I, get some questions from you and some answers from you? And you sit down with them, everything's dandy, you think you're making a legitimate friend. Next minute, they add you on Facebook. They say, come meet my mentor. That's another way to kind of figure out if they're part of a cult. Like you were saying, Tim, there is this veneration of leaders in cults, and people often in cults think they're the Messiah, these leaders. They're a bit deluded, and some of these cults are saying that these leaders never die. That's how ridiculous it is, and we know that that's a delusion. People do reach 100 and then kind of end up dead, but some people don't think that. They actually legitimately see these people as the savior. They're not going to die. They somehow are going to bring heaven onto earth. It's a delusion. And how did that happen? Just through a series of brainwashing tactics that make you venerate a specific person. And it's done, like I said before, under like fraud, because there's a level of deception involved. You think these people are the Messiah because they're telling you lies about all their great deeds and the miracles that have happened to them and whatnot. And some gullible people actually believe that. So, it is what it is. But I mean, I believe God gives people discernment. If you fall for, some anti-Christian imposter, you're going to get burned in that cult. And I'm seeing a lot of people in cults, they get drained financially, they get drained physically, they lose their friendships. These cults sometimes try and isolate you from your family members. It can, in a way, it's like drinking the Kool-Aid, because even though you're not taking like a big massive swig of this suicidal drug, a lot of cults, the methods they use over time, it'll just drain you. So you're left with nothing. Depression often sets in, and I've talked to a lot of these ex-members from cults, and they tell me that, they felt really depressed afterwards. Everything's been taken from them. I mean, imagine living in this cult delusion for 5-10 years. You can't go back and redo that aspect of your life. So they can be so damaging in ways, even though you're not like outright being told to kill yourself, you are sort of being drained over a number of years. It's very sinister.
So another South Korean cult based on Christianity, or says it's Christian, is the Shinjo Onji. I think have I pronounced that right?
Shinjo Onji, yep.
Yeah, so it calls itself the Church of Jesus, and it also has other names as well. So I guess, first of all, what's the difference between the Unification Church and Shinjeonji?
Good question. Well, a lot of these South Korean cults, they have a lot of overlap to them in terms of their methodologies. Like they start with Bible studies and whatever, base it on Christianity. Unification Church, I believe, was more like criminal in terms of like trafficking potentially and that sort of stuff I've heard. Shinjeonji, there hasn't been outright allegations of any like sexual trafficking or anything like that, not like other cults like JMS, for example, or the Providence Church cult.
Which is the other one from South Korea, where the leader's actually been
imprisoned.
Imprisoned, which right. we should name and shame him, Jung Moing Suk, who actually went to went to prison, and he's also been accused of sexual. Well, is he being convicted of sexual assault?
Yeah, I like the details are a bit foggy. I did do an interview with a woman who was actually coming out of that cult. So I can link that for more information about that cult specifically and the allegations involved. In terms of Shinjonji stuff, it might seem like a more minor cult in that regard because there isn't the whole, someone's not gone to prison yet for like a sexual crime, for example, except we're seeing a lot of similarities between this cult and other South Korean cults which have been kind of in the news for trafficking and that sort of thing. So that's why I do warn people about Shinjonji, because you just never know, who these people really are. Like in South Korea, you've never met the guy, you don't know what he's really like. And then people sometimes go to South Korea to actually meet these people. But with Shinjonji, I find the most devastating aspect of it is how it isolates people in this cult from their family members, and they're living in a delusion. They believe that this cult, this guy is the Messiah. That's what they believe. And
so this is Lee Man-hee.
Yeah, correct. And so it isolates you. I mean, having that view when the rest of the church doesn't have that view, it's going to isolate you from the real church. It's going to cause conflict and divisions. It's going to drain you financially. I know for a fact a lot of these members give hundreds of dollars to these people each kind of month. So that's a lot of consistent funds going into some bank account, and who knows where those funds are going. I don't want to sit here making up things I don't know for sure and state it as evidence, but it looks very similar to these other cult operations, and to call it a legitimate church I think is ridiculous, frankly, because there's a lot of secrecy involved in this cult. They don't want to tell you they're part of Shinjonji. They hate exposure, public exposure. When you have like lists of these names of who all is in the cult, they don't like that. So if you're not prepared to publicly state, I'm a Christian that goes to so-and-so's church or whatever, then it's like, why the lack of transparency there? That's one of the red flags indicating someone's caught up in a cult, that these people are told to be very secretive about things. And I'm just seeing a lot of people get drained financially, physically.
How much money are we talking about? Because obviously traditional Christian churches have the collection plate. But so how much money are we talking about that those who are part of these cults are giving?
That's a good question. And, there's ongoing investigations into exactly how much they're giving. I do know for a fact that there's definitely over 300 members, for example, in Australia. There's actually quite a lot of people here that are recruiting others. So these are just people, members of the church, recruiting others. So there's hundreds of people here, and they're all giving, tithes, because that's what they're told. One of the things they need to do is give 10% of their wage, because it comes from some biblical reference in the Bible, actually, like you're supposed to give 10% or whatever. It's up to how the church wants to interpret how, that provision is supposed to be interpreted, and if you're supposed to actually give 10% like hard cash. But, this church, Shinjonji Church, does think that you need to give 10% of your wage. So if someone's getting like, say, $50,000 to $70,000 a year, I mean, 10% of 50,000, that's a lot of cash you're giving to this church.
Is it compulsory to be a membership on that church?
Yeah, it's compulsory to give tithes.
Because I know that Hillsong, they encourage their members to give a percentage of their income, and I'm not sure what your view is on Hillsong, but obviously there's been lots of allegations against the founder, and obviously there's a lot of fiscal churn as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't brought up. I think Hillsong's a Pentecostal church. I wasn't actually brought up as a Pentecostal, so I don't know that much about Hillsong. I do know the allegations you're talking about, though. And since then, I know people who don't even want to play Hillsong music in their churches because of this whole debacle. I mean, I never looked too deep into Hillsong personally, but yeah, that was a bit of a disaster from what I've heard. And I don't know about the fiscal aspect of that, but I've heard that someone covered up some sexual crime or something.
Yes, so well, he's resigned now. Brian Houston was accused of covering up his father, Frank Houston's sexual abuse. Nothing's come of that, like charges.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I can't follow every single issue that closely, but I do know what you're talking about. I do think it is a problem for churches to be covering up crimes. And you hear this in many different churches, not just Hillsong, but there's, if some pedophile or whatever enters a church and the pastor doesn't want to be seen as incompetent for not, dealing with that issue, then it's in the church's interest to want to cover that up. And I'm not saying that's a biblical decision. It's not biblical to cover this stuff up, but you can see why they would want to do that, to preserve their congregations, to preserve the money coming in for that pastor.
During the 1980s in the United States, there was these boom of these televangelists, and there was many who were living lavish lifestyles with all the money that they were given. And there's also many who, were very amoral people themselves. I can't remember who's that. I could probably look it up. That evangelist who he was caught having an affair and said, "I've sinned, my Lord," did this tearful apology on TV. The most recent fall from grace was Jerry Falwell's son. He caught in a voyeurism sexual threesome.
Oh my goodness. I hear about all this stuff and it honestly doesn't surprise me, Tim. Like, we know there's narcissists out there, and I'm not calling anyone specifically a narcissist. I don't want a defamation lawsuit here, but this happens in churches often, unfortunately. And are they really churches? They can't possibly be. Like, if you've got some narcissistic pastor person misusing that church framework for power, for money, to get away with sexual crimes and whatever, that's not even a real church. Like, that's definitely a cult. And, some people... I don't buy this whole idea that, some people sin and so we should forgive them of their sins and they can repent. And I don't buy that. If you're in a pastor role and, you've been given a responsibility to be a decent leader for your church congregation, preaching morals and whatever, I don't understand how these figures can get away with stuff like that and not be called out on it. Like, they're not churches. They can't possibly be running legitimate churches. They're just narcissists.
Jimmy Swaggart, that was the pastor's name, who did that tearful confession. So he's actually still around. So yeah, it was two separate prostitution scandals.
Wow. Well, did you hear about the whole Zacharias issue? What was his name? That guy, Zacharias, I think. The guy who was done for some massage parlor. He owned some massage parlor or something.
I know that there was in the 2000 the United States, there was this Reverend Ted Haggett.
Ravi Zacharias, sorry.
Who was admitted at the end he was having these therapeutic massages by male prostitutes. We'd probably be here all night if we were recalling them. But I suppose the difference between these sorts of figures and cults is that the followers, the flock, they still relatively can live normal lives on the outside, while a cult is that all your time and your work life is committed to the cult.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I know people who followed Ravi Zachariah, and they're not cult people. So they just got duped, I suppose. They thought he was a legitimate pastor and theologian type, and got, I guess, seduced by his eloquence and decided he was a good man to follow. And they're not cult members just because they believe in this guy and follow him. But I think the difference between that and like an organized cult, like I've seen documentation from how some of these organized cults operate. They've got like Excel spreadsheets up about like who they're going to call that week in terms of pastors they're going to make contact with and try rope into these studies. It's all done in a very coordinated fashion. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a difference between someone who's just fallen, who happens to be leading a church and has duped a bunch of church people there. There's a difference between that and, just a sinful idiot pastor, and then like a coordinated cult leader who has got like Excel spreadsheets and like funds going into specific bank accounts and that kind of thing. There's a difference there. So yeah, but both of them can be just as devastating actually, because I mean, if you listen to narcissists for advice, how can that not impinge on your life in some way? You're not getting fed proper like advice. It's gonna drain you somehow in life, whether you see it or not. So just if you fall for a narcissistic cult type or a sinful person, and then you're gonna be screwed either way, whether you're in an organized cult or not.
Why are there so many of these cults in South Korea? What is it about I've followed a bit of what is like the sort of cultural decline in South Korea. It's not just their political system that's in turmoil, but their fertility rate is catastrophic. And although they've got all these cultural exports such as K-pop, boy bands, and these Korean movies, there's a lot of them who commit suicide because like there's this real dark it's the suicide rate of that country is astronomical. So there's obviously it's an advanced country, but there's a lot of grimness underneath. Is that part of the reason why cults have been able to fester?
I absolutely agree. That's a really good observation to make. Like you see cults proliferate in nations where there's conditions for cults to proliferate in. And what is that? Like societies with broken families, like no decent male leadership in the home. Then people become gullible and whatever to crime, to criminals, and they fall for narcissists. They're not getting good. They're not being fed properly in the home environment. It makes you lack discernment. So I think like bad home environments, also just a society full of violence, and it can drive people to radical ideas about the world. I mean, look at South Korea. It's like dealing with North Korea. I know that people there are like conscripted into the army and stuff like that. They have to do like the young males need to do like mandatory military service and all of that kind of thing. I mean, they're exposed to a lot more violence than other nations maybe, especially here in the West, where we're not exposed to that level of persecution and violence and grimness. So I think those conditions certainly breed radical behaviors and kind of drive people into looking for savior figures, I think. So that's one issue. And the other issue is it's just not policed very well. Like, to stop a cult, you need good fraud lawyers and good law enforcement. And over in South Korea and some of these other Asian provinces, I mean, when you're dealing with attacks from other nations like North Korea, whatever, you don't have all that funding necessarily to go into stopping crime, like on the streets and whatever. So just a lack of funding in the correct departments, corruption. There's all sorts of reasons why cults proliferate, I think. And also South Korea, I've been told it's a very communal herd mentality sort of culture. So if one person gets sucked into some cult, they bring all their family members into it. And a lot of these cults resemble each other because there's just a copycat culture. So they look at one cult leader, probably looks at some other cult and thinks that worked, those tactics, I'm going to employ that and copy that. And so they just copy each other. That's why there's so many similarities between South Korean cults. And yeah, I think those conditions just in general that I mentioned before breed cults.
over in the Northeast Asia, there's a lot of these, well, they're New Age slash spirit belief system. So I'll start with Falun Gong. Now, obviously, there's a lot of sympathy for them in the West because they're persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party, and they have built a very sophisticated anti-CCP apparatus in the West, such as the Epoch Times, and they've also had their dance troupe tour here. I know Sky News had on repeat the Sheng Yung ads. What's your view on Falun Gong?
I've contacted some Falun Gong people. So actually, you might be interested in this, but in ACT, right in front of Parliament House, Falun Gong congregate like all the time. Like if you go to Parliament House, just pick any day of the week and go there. You'll probably see them there.
Yeah, you might see in the CBDs of your city some anti-CCP petition. That's them.
Yeah, exactly. So I see them a lot, just because I'm based in ACT. So that's one thing. I've interacted with a few of them, and yeah, they tell me about like organ harvesting and all of that sort of thing. I have a lot of sympathy for these people because, I mean, they're living in China. Many of them that are here got out and they're telling their stories. Half the time they've got family members who had like their organs harvested or whatever. It's very hard for people who've had their organs harvested to even get out of China to begin with. So, and I've actually been to parliamentary briefings where I've seen victims of organ harvesting. So they've spoken and I've heard their stories, and it's extremely grim stuff. So I have a lot of sympathy for them. As for their religion, I mean, I'm a Christian first and foremost, so I would say maybe their doctrine's not the one I would personally follow. But yeah, I've got sympathy for them because they're doing something against the Chinese Communist Party, along with the Christian church there as well. And I've heard Uyghur people also get severely persecuted as well over there. So yeah, it's a complicated
the Muslims in Xinjiang province, where
yeah,
it's what the CCP is trying to do to them is like forced assimilation, because there's only one body that you're allowed to really worship in People's Republic of China, and that's the CCP.
Yeah. So it's an awful situation over there, and I feel for them. Yeah, but I can't say I believe what they believe.
Feng Shui, that was a sort of a craze fad that sort of came to Australia 20 years ago about all spirits. You got to arrange your room in a particular way. That seemed to me more of, it was we see today there's like crystal therapy. That was sort of like a version of that. It's not real. It really, like, some can be really obsessive compulsive over it. Have you done much looking into how, because it's obviously still around, but certainly a lot of people got rich off it, being Feng Shui consultants?
I've actually never heard of Feng Shui.
Like, I've never heard
of, no. Never heard of that. So what's this room arranging thing you're talking about? Like, I understand crystal healing and all that. I assume that was like new agey type stuff. What's this?
Yeah, that's you've heard of crystal.
Yeah,
crystal healing therapies.
All that stuff. Yep.
Like that sort of has come like the last 10 years. I'm talking 20 years ago. So you have to arrange your room so that there's all these good energies, and so you get good. It's a way to get like good fortune to protect yourself.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I can't comment too much on that just because I don't know much about it, but that sounds just deluded to me. What's that going to achieve? Other than just making you just drained to want to clean your room. Like, what? No, I don't understand that logic.
I mean, yeah, like these sorts of like
That's absurd.
yeah.
That's actually absurd.
So apparently, like you like what I know of it, you've got bad feng shui in like the camera angle you've got set up because you've got the
Oh, I
door
see. Should I
behind
just
you.
like
Yeah,
make
yeah, and so
a
some
bit different?
one of your enemies could come in and attack you because you've got your
Oh,
back
okay.
turned to the to the
That's
door.
an odd one. I've never heard of that, but I should look into that now that you've mentioned it.
Although
Should we talk
these,
about like the? Oh, sorry. Do you want to talk about like the Islamic cult at all?
oh well, this
Totally up to
is
you.
yeah, yeah, obviously Islam. There's if you leave, like the thing about Islam is if you leave, there can be deadly consequences. Like with Christianity, like it's so common to hear like a lot of Australians say today, I'm a lapsed Catholic. Like the Catholic Church doesn't go and hunt you down because you haven't been to church in
Right.
10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's a lot of their practices which, well, we consider barbaric, such as female genital mutilation. Like I also think it's wrong like to like make little girls wear the headscarf. I also have the same view on, like, obviously we see a lot of Sikhs around because of Indian mass migration. Like I don't like seeing the little boys having to cover their hair as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Islam, it can, a lot of people don't realize this about Islam. It's not just like any other religion. It's not like just Christianity or whatever. This is a political ideology, and it's not associated with one specific race either. So this idea that Caucasian people can't be, sucked into Islam is a lie. I've actually seen some stalls in Melbourne, actually, where you are, Tim, stalls in the CBD, and you've probably seen them, where they give out free Qurans and whatnot. And sitting at these tables, I've seen some white people, and they've told me that, yeah, they converted out of Christianity into Islam. What they don't realize
Are many of them ginger?
Ginger.
Yeah, because there was when ISIS was on its destructive, sadistic rampage, they used this white convert. He was known as the ginger jihadi, and it let this focus on that there was actually quite a few of these like ginger Islamists.
Wow. Like you're talking about Caucasian ginger people.
Yeah, Caucasian gingers.
All right then. That's interesting. I've not heard that one before. But Islam, it's different to other religions because it's a political ideology. They do actually want to make Australia into an Islamic caliphate. That is the goal. They do breed people specifically for the purpose of, infiltrating the country basically in all our institutions and to Islamify it. That is the goal there. And it's also incompatible with Australia's human rights laws. So a lot of people, they have a very surface view of what is in the Quran, but there's actually verses in there that say, you should kill and maim non-Islamic people. And I think only if the government understood this, or our, immigration departments understood this, they would try and find out if people were Islamic before actually bringing them in. They've got to vet them properly. But yeah, there's real danger, I think, in Australia not understanding the nature of cults and some religions, which are more than religions, but political ideologies, because, yeah, it's incompatible with Australia's law. And I'm seeing a big problem here with Australia inviting in all these people. And I'm not anti-migration, obviously. I'm not Caucasian. I've come from a family of migrants. So I'm not anti-migration. But when it comes to bringing in people, and this goes with Xinjiang and any other cult from Asia or whatever as well, you need to take note of who these people are, their belief systems, and whether it's smart to bring them in here, because they're going to come with crimes. We looked at those Bankstown nurses now. One of them, they found morphine in the guy's locker. They were admitting to killing people. That's what they did. So I don't understand how Australia's bringing people in like this when they're not really vetting them properly, evidently. But that's one of the reasons Christianity is being diluted in the West. I don't think it's a good thing. All these other new doctrines are coming in and it's destroying the country.
We will probably, like in India, the Hinduism is the majority religion. It's full of these various gurus who have this cult following. Because there has been this pivot away from Middle Eastern and Chinese immigration to Indian migration. I mentioned you see a lot of Sikh turbans around now, but we will probably get a lot more of these local Hindu gurus.
You're talking about Hindu people. Well, obviously what's going on in India now is really frightening for Christians and other religious minorities there, even if you're just a secular person there, because this Hindu nationalist movement is happening. On the news, there was like this massacre that was going to be planned, and people exposed it in time, but it was organized for the state of Chhattisgarh. And that's where a lot of religious persecution goes on, specifically for Christianity. They're trying to drive out Christians, the Hindu nationalists there, and there's also Naxals there as well. They're like lefty types that are trying to kick out Christians and just cause a muck over there. And so India's going through its own issues, and that's close to my heart as someone who is from, an Indian background. I've been to India many times, and you've got some regions in India where there's, like, for example, in the capital of Kerala, there's a temple there, there's a Islamic mosque there, there's a church there, all on the same street, and that's fine. No one thinks that's anything, like, it's not an issue. But then you go north to the north regions of India, and there's no like churches down there, or if there are, they're being heavily like graffitied and destroyed. People are driving out Christians there. So India under Modi and this national Hindu movement is causing a lot of problems for people down there. So that's, I guess, another cult, this Hindu nationalist issue.
And we're seeing it spill over into Australia. It goes viral it went viral recently, the mini riot in the Melbourne CBD between the Hindus and the Sikhs. And then in Canada, there was this massive riot in Brompton in Ontario. Some Sikhs had attacked a Hindu temple, and then they wanted revenge, and they were stopped by the police there. And the way that some of these Hindu and Sikh radicals carry on in they remind me of Islamists, shouting, pointing their finger.
Yeah, you're completely right. I mean, what's happening with the Hindu nationalist movement, like in India, they are acting like Islamists. That is a fact. They're violent, no regard for anyone that's not of their religion. A lot of these religions, actually, even like you take something like Buddhism, for example. Everyone thinks Buddhist regimes, they're like, into healing and peace and meditation, whatever. I mean, go to Burma or something like that. It's like Buddhist regime there. What's going on there? They're killing Christians. So whenever there's like some religion that's not Christianity, you've got to just inquire a bit and figure out what these people really believe, because a lot of them are perpetuating violence. That's what's in their religious books and whatever. And one thing that stands out about Christianity is it doesn't promote violence. And the Old Testament is different to the New Testament, but Jesus was not a proponent of violence. So I think that's one thing that this country does well, Australia, is it was founded on Christian values, and that's why it's doing so well. All these Islamic people, all these Hindu people, Buddhist people, they all want to come here, but they never ask why. They want to come here because it's a country based on good principles and morality and peace. You get peace here. It's a safe haven. It's a refuge, really. And people from all these other war-torn regions full of persecution, they want to leave those regions and come here. So I think we need to ask why that is and what religions are actually good when it comes to governing nations and making them secure, good places to live.
Obviously, Australians, they spot there the obvious, like, cults, pseudo religions such as Scientology. I mean, it's the free personality tests. Everyone, most Australians are aware of that, and the e-meters and how ridiculous that all is. Although should be careful though. There, of course, is that South Park episode where it ends, "We're going to sue you for saying all this stuff about Scientology." So there's an awareness of cults, but not sort of, and obviously they're like the ones that another one that people consider a cult is because it is isolationist Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, they know that the Watchtower is the Jehovah's Witness publication.
Yeah, when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, I've heard it's a cult. I actually don't know too much about that, to be honest with you, Jehovah's Witnesses. I never really looked that deep into it. I do know one guy that was now not in Jehovah's Witnesses. He became a New Age sort of person and abused people in that. So I've heard there's like abuse allegations and whatever associated with Jehovah's Witnesses, but no, I don't know any details really about it. Sorry to be boring.
Well, let's turn to now, when it comes to political ideologies, political organizations, the term cult is thrown around quite a bit. I thought I'd mix up tonight's show. So I've been noticing that a lot of the Democrats, leftist progressives on social media are calling MAGA a cult, and they've been spreading this video. So I thought, you haven't seen this, so I'd be eager to get your thoughts on it. This is how apparently MAGA is a cult.
America is a land of freedom, independence, and individual thinking. But sometimes an idea comes along that's just a little different. And before you know it, whoops, you're in a cult.
Honey, where are my eggs?
Dear leader says Joe Biden took them.
The signs are crystal clear. Learn how to spot them in How to Know You Are in a Cult. First sign, good leader. For a cult to work, it needs a good leader, and a good leader is never wrong. If something bad happens, like high gas prices, a recession, or even a plane crashing,
President Trump says it was Joe Biden.
he needs to be able to shift the blame. Second sign, don't question. In a cult, questioning the leader can be dangerous. The moment you think for yourself, poof, you disappear quicker than an aging wife. Third sign, loyalty wins. A good cult leader must reward loyalty. And if you're a billionaire, well, you can do whatever you want, even to the least deserved. Fourth sign, see things his way. Even if you saw things with your own eyes and ears and every shred of evidence points in one direction, if he says otherwise, see things his way. So how do you know you're in a cult? Simple. If your leader is never wrong, punishes his enemies, and lets his richest friends run amok while convincing you that everything bad is someone else's fault, well, congratulations. You are in a cult.
That was so funny.
Can I get your reaction to that?
Yeah, that is interesting. Who created that one? Obviously,
So it was on a Instagram account that is called Hang on, I'll get it back here in a moment.
The Putin scene made me laugh, honestly. That was funny.
Yeah, it's actually got the Instagram handle on the video, so
It's okay. I can probably dig it up later.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I mean, yeah, the left always says, oh, these MAGA right-wing radical types, they're like all these cult people. I mean, they're the groups that's trying to stop crime. So I don't understand that. Historically speaking, cults were known for being, they operate criminal situations or whatever. So the left is actually the cult, if anything. You've got them pushing for prostitution laws, radical abortion laws where you're like killing children. How's that different from satanic ritual abuse, really? When you have like full-term abortions and whatever, and some women sign up to have abortions that late in a pregnancy. How's that different from what they do in some cults where you've got like ritualistic abortions? That's what some Satanists push. So they think we're like the MAGA supporting types are cult people. I think the radical left are actually the cult people there. And also they're mutilating children these days. Just look at the LGBT thing, whatever your views on LGBT are. I mean, look at the kids and what they're doing to children, mutilating their genitalia. This is what they do in Islam and stuff like that. So I don't think there's grounds to be calling right-wing radicals a cult. I think the opposite is the case.
And I see plenty of MAGA supporters who say, I don't like that Trump hasn't done that or has done that. I wish he hadn't appointed that person to the administration. There's not, oh, well, whatever Trump. There is sometimes when Trump does or says something which a lot of people think, well, that makes no sense. There's some who try to say, oh, he's playing like 4D chess, 5D chess, and they try to claim, oh, you're trying to excuse his mania.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump, I've got interesting maybe views on Trump because I'm not black and white about it. I don't think a lot of people actually are black and white about it. Some people absolutely hate the man or really love him. I'm sort of in between. Like, I'm just seeing a guy who, he's risen to this leadership role. He's got all these responsibilities and he's trying to clean up a really messed up country right now. And no guy's perfect, but he's doing a pretty damn good job, I have to say, in cleaning up America's crime by stationing military at the border. I mean, these are decisions they're pivotal for the country in terms of what they're achieving historically. So, people can pick on his maybe more minor views, but in terms of the major policies, I think he's on the right track. And yeah, some people don't like his personality, but quite honestly, I just think grow a spine. If you want to go walk the street and look at some random person and say that person should be president, well, then they're going to do a worse job than Trump. So, some people rise to these positions because they're actually competent enough to do it. And some people can't admit that that's why he is the prime president of America, because he actually is competent to do that role. And not a lot of people can handle the economy. And, he doesn't have dementia for one thing. So, and he's got all this experience. So I think he is actually the right person to run the country at that time. And a lot of people disagree just because they think he's aggressive or whatever. But you've got to look at what people do, not so much what they say. People can say anything for publicity reasons or other strategies. And I'll give you one example. So, did you see that Trump Gaza video? Like, he shared on Instagram?
Yes, I thought it was hilarious.
I know. A lot of people are just like, what the heck? Like, the whole world turned upside down because we're not used to seeing political people operate like this. But what does it do? It's generating traffic. I mean, I'm not a fan of the half-naked Middle Eastern girls, but actually think about what this video is going to do. It's going to give the FBI, which is now run by Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, really great anti-corruption people for the country. It's going to give them plenty of leads to go and find where these neo-jihadi terrorists are. Where are these people? Well, just look at the comment section of that video and you'll actually dig up some really good leads there. So there's a reason people need to look a bit deeper than just the surface of of things, and they see a video and think that's so immature. How can a politician ever do something like that? Well, he's got a platform which he's generated through doing stunts like this. He's a publicity king, I suppose. He knows how to generate traffic. He's got a sense of humor, which I think a lot of people enjoy, and he knows how to tick off the right people in ways that will give the FBI a lot of leads. So in terms of strategy, that's pretty good. I mean, I don't agree with absolutely everything the man does, and I don't like every aspect of those types of videos he might post, but in the scheme of things, I think we need someone who's going to shake things up a bit. Yeah.
Talking about the video, that's classic straw man, shows a lack of self-awareness. The video was on the Instagram cherries, and so it's made several of these sorts of videos. But you're exactly right that it's a form of projection from the Democrat progressives. I mean, remember they had the Planned Parenthood infanticide incinerator outside of their national convention last year. That was just
Whoa. Talk about a lack of sensitivity.
And
Yes.
all the Democrat senators voted against protecting women's sports. Like, in terms of like the trans issue, I mean, surely you can at least agree that it's unfair for biological men to compete in women's sports, but they just don't see, like, it's either they don't want to compromise because they don't want to cede that they could have got this wrong, or they just are so adherent to the beliefs of this that they think that this is perfectly fine.
I think there's a lot of like cognitive dissonance out there. And like the other thing is they might inherently know that that's a disaster. I mean, honestly, did you see that Olympics? I think it was the Olympics, the boxing guy, what was his name? Iman Khalif or something.
Although that was a bit more of a
This biological male,
yeah,
gets inside
that
a
was
ring,
sort of like
punches
more like it was a bit more sort of grey because Amin Khalif.
because he intersex, I suppose. Yeah, I
Yes,
understand what you're saying. Yeah, but biologically, he's a male because of the whole chromosome situation. So I think letting people like that in sports is like into women's sports is a disaster because you're going to end up killing women at some stage. And the left don't want to admit that they're wrong about anything because it shows like they probably think it shows weakness to like backflip on views.
They still want to support child gender transitions, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones.
But also it's a lot of money. I mean, Big Pharma are probably, lobbying these people. Because like
they did during COVID.
It's so corrupt.
That was another cult. Do you still see people with masks on? This is 5 years after the madness.
I know.
There's still hardcore members. Their belief is that have you heard of long COVID? So apparently we're all continuing to be reinfected with this level 4 biohazard disease. We're all there's going to be a mass disabling in 5-10 years where our brains are going to be fried and all our internal organs are going to be crippled. They've argued that like plane crashes or like vehicle accidents, they're caused by long COVID.
Right. I mean, there's some hardcore people that are just never going to change their views. I've kind of come to that, resigned to that fact that there's some people out there who would get jabbed, even if it's like their 12th booster, they're not going to.
And by getting the vaccines, they're conceding that it doesn't work. Like, what type of medication, if it's not effective, not safe and effective, you just keep taking them.
Right? And don't ask me, how have we not eradicated this pandemic after 12 boosters? What?
There's not a pandemic.
Well, exactly. I agree with you. There is not a pandemic. pandemic proportions. Yes, there is a COVID virus. Some people don't believe there's a COVID virus. I think there was a virus.
Yeah, there were certainly some
There was something.
hardcore freedom people who, like, if somebody took the vax voluntarily, they'd like shun them. Like there was this on the other side, these hardcore like they didn't want to be around the vaccinated because they believed that it would shed on them.
Oh yeah. I heard about the whole shedding thing, and to be honest, I'm still alive. I haven't been, I haven't died yet from shedding or whatever. Look, there's some.
No, they're vaccinated shedding on you.
Yeah, I know. Like, but I'm surrounded by vaccinated people. Do you know what I mean? And I haven't had
Yeah.
issues, so I don't know about this whole shedding thing and whether that's going to affect people to any damaging sort of degree. I just prefer when I look into COVID stuff to just look at the evidence of facts that I can understand. And if I don't understand something like concept like shedding or whatever, I just don't want to think too much about this shedding concept, because then like, don't you become black-pilled? You're sort of just living here thinking, well, we're going to die eventually because some person's going to shed on you and then that's it. But I don't believe that, because I'm a Christian. I believe God can work miracles. He can keep people alive if he wants you to be alive. So that's my view on things. I don't think it's the end of the world if someone sheds on you. I actually think we should fear other things more than death. One of those things being God, in my opinion.
Now, similar to the cults in terms that there's a lot of deception and brainwashing and financial depletion, is scammers, catfishers, and just con artists. So Australia is a fertile market for a lot of these old boomers with lots of money who I don't understand for some reason are happy to give like tens of thousands of dollars repeatedly to these Indian scammers. It's not all, you've got a tax debt, but they sell them some sort of investment thing and they just willfully do it. It's like
I don't understand it. I'm like Indian and I agree with you. Like half these conversations I have on the phone with people, it's like someone rang me up, his name was Sanjay. I don't know any Sanjays, okay? But when Sanjay rings you up and asks you for a bunch of money or to swap coupon codes with you or something, doesn't that ring alarm bells in some people? Apparently it doesn't. But yeah, I don't understand how people are getting scammed through that. Don't give money to people you don't know.
And I just hope that we, because we think that our generation, we're savvy on this. Like, I so hope that, there's the people of our generation don't fall for it when they're older.
Yeah, you'd hope so. Well, I think, like you said, boomers might fall for this kind of thing because they weren't the technology age. And they're so gullible, a lot of them. These old ladies, honestly. They do fall for scammers and they're generous. They want to give. Like, honestly, some of their husbands have died who would otherwise have told them, don't give this guy money. So they prey on widow types and people who just maybe are a bit gullible there. And I don't think that'll happen to our generation. You would think and hope we're a bit more savvier than that. But I think we'll be dealing with a lot worse issues than Sanjay. I think we'll be dealing with cyber attacks. So that's our whole issue and warfare. So
people of our generation can be susceptible to online catfishes because of the prevalence of online dating and the apps. So, and it's often women who believe that they've met the dream guy, and they can chat for months and months and months and not meet them and hand over money. Or it can be a real life relationship. It could go on for several years, but it's just designed to get finances from them. And sometimes it can just be that it's a whole sort of like family operation where just take all your possessions from you and then disappear.
Right. Oh my gosh. Now we're talking about some really depraved sort of stuff, like people who actually are so low that they're going to get into fake relations with people over a matter of months. Honestly, There's better ways to get money from people than that. What kind of mastermind criminal sits behind a computer, drafts up some strategic plan on how to like date this particular woman and extract money from her? That's so time consuming. Quite honestly, these people have nothing better to do than to try that tactic to gain money. There's easier ways to gain money than that. I don't understand people like that.
Well, and then there's your old-fashioned con artists, like, what is that? Mel Gibson has been back. And the worst thing about that is because, well, I think it's because she was a pretty young woman. Like, the mainstream media got sucked in. And what is it? I think one of the morning show presenters said, you look very good for somebody who's had cancer, because she never had cancer. And she got a Apple Watch deal for a book, The Whole Pantry, and Lisa Wilkinson at Women's Weekly gave her an award.
Oh. Oh my goodness. That's ridiculous. So you're telling me this woman never actually had cancer?
No, she claimed that healthy eating cured her cancer.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you see all these other health guru type scam people too. And a lot of these new age people, like if they're a new age person selling you like tinctures or something, or some retreat or whatever, they get a lot of money doing that too. Because do you know how much people shug out for these sorts of spiritual retreats? And they're just nonsense, you know?
Well,
You
there
drink,
was that.
you go on a fast for a week or whatever. And I'm not anti-fasting, but geez, just why do you need to go on an expensive retreat just to do that? It's a money making thing.
There's a woman who died last year drinking a deadly mushroom smoothie at a health retreat.
That's extremely unfortunate. All I can say is, like, do the research before you take any of these things. I'm not anti naturopathic methods. I'm actually pro that. I'm not a fan of allopathic type of methods and drugs and whatever. So yeah, I do a lot of supplements and that kind of thing, but just know what you're doing and don't like overdose on some mushroom you don't even know anything about, clearly. Why? It's just such a waste of life.
The reason I've brought all this up, because the way they get people in is similar to how cults operate. Like, I come to this retreat, this is this new way of living. And we've got this new holistic approach, and often it involves isolation as well. So
That's true.
yeah, there's all these different warning signs, whether it be cults, like new health craze, or.
That's very true. I never really thought of it like that, like some of these spiritual retreats and health gurus being cult leaders out to get people. I think in like the naturopathic realm, yes, there are some people that go on these retreats and they're run by decent people who actually believe, you know, they've got qualifications. It's not like they just went on some YouTube tutorial to figure out how to heal people. Some of them are qualified types, and you know, they're doing the right thing, they believe. And then, you know, but with health, you're always taking a risk. You know, if you're going to say, I'm not going to take these allopathic methods and I'm going to do this, and that's your choice to do it, and people genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, I don't think you can call that a cult. But if people have set up an organization designed to actually get money off people, and they know what they're doing is not going to heal people from cancer or whatever, I think that's totally different, and that's completely negligent. But they're two different things.
Now, you're just finished a law degree, Juris Doctor. So what is, because I listened to you on another podcast, Cultivated, which is by a cult survivor, Sally. So I'll put the show into the chat.
Awesome.
So you spoke about that it's complicated to try and legislate protections to protect people from cults.
Yeah, it can be tricky, just because people can misuse legislation, and I said that in the Cultivated podcast as well. People can misuse broad legislation, and if you're gonna have like a cult act or something, it's got to be incredibly specific, well drafted, to the point where you safeguard people who would otherwise be targeted by those
Is
sorts of
there a precedent?
provisions.
Like, is there good
Um,
legislation somewhere in the world?
To be honest with you, I haven't personally come across like a cult act yet. I should probably dig a bit deeper into that and look what other nations have done, maybe even South Korea. But you would think they would have dealt with this issue, but I haven't seen a specific cult act. All I can say is when it comes to cults, usually like the darker ones involving law enforcement, they're involved in crimes. So you look at the criminal code and you can get people on a lot of those crimes, so you don't necessarily need a cult act. Does that make sense? Like, if they're not doing something that's actually criminal, like in the criminal code, what can you get them on? You can't take someone to court just because they've been narcissistic to you. Do you know what I mean? It's very difficult there.
Otherwise, most of our politicians would be in jail.
Exactly. That's the point. That's why you can't just have a cult act that's so broad and can take down anybody. It needs to be targeted specifically and in a way that's going to actually stop the issue you're trying to stop.
And also, just being aware of, if looking at the signs, if a family member or a friend has joined a cult.
Yeah. So did you want me to talk specifically about those sorts of what you can see in people? Well, they will be kind of going off and doing their own thing. You might not even notice that they're going to studies or whatever, going to these other events, but you'll just notice they won't be around the house as much. And if usually they are family type people and they like spending time with you and family, and all of a sudden they're not doing that, or gradually and incrementally they're sort of doing other things with friends that you've never really met, that's one sign that they're getting roped into something that they think is more important than family. And usually that's some sort of religious idea that they're getting caught up in. So that's a big red flag when they start, ignoring family or whatever. And I'm not saying all cult people do ignore family. A lot of people do make time for family, but you just notice that they're not making as much time, for those things that they used to do. They might not have time for hobbies and stuff like that anymore because they're busy doing cult stuff. Part of these cults being in cults means they're being asked to tithe, they're being asked to work and recruit other people into cults. They want to keep you sucked into the cult, these leaders, so they'll keep you busy. So you don't often have a lot of time for art and that kind of thing. So if they stop doing hobbies that they used to find fun, that when you're talking to them and you bring up, are you in a cult or whatever, and they flat out deny it or get defensive and that kind of thing. Like they might lie about where they're going as well. That's a big one. When people start lying about where they're traveling and stuff like that. That's another one. If you've noticed they're not having as many funds in their bank account, can't fund holidays and things like that, like they usually would be able to, you start wondering where's that cash going. So that's another red flag. You'll see changes in their behavior too, because part of the brainwashing means you're taking someone's personality away from them. You're making them into some like sheep that operates for this cult. They almost become like a robotic version of themselves. So you will notice changes in their behavior too, and they won't always be great ones.
Yes, that's why I think it's important to always make the effort to have regular connections with family members. So, also because family should always come first.
Absolutely.
Because obviously, if you're not really communicating with them, you're not really going to know that they might have been sucked into a cult. So it's obviously a key message, I think, is to like protect our society from cults, is just to have maintain those connections. Australia it's losing that family and community.
I think so.
Community connections. Like you could be living next door to a cult or a meth house and not even know it. That's the sort of there's no hello neighbor these days as much.
I have noticed that. And because I was of the generation that kind of grew up with social media, but only towards like high school, I still know a world and a reality without that. Do you know what I mean? And I've noticed a massive big difference. People who, you know, connect in with you, value face-to-face communication, time with the other person. That's all being lost in our society with social media and with people being drawn into cults. And this wasn't like our society is not like it was 20 years ago. With added immigration, I honestly feel, and I've said this in other podcasts, in like the added immigration is opening this nation up to new doctrines it's never had to deal with before, new ways of thinking, new cult operations, new types of fraudsters. So this country is dealing with these new types of issues that it didn't have to deal with 20 years ago. And that's going to shape everything around us, how we relate to our families. So many Australians are going through this. They know members of their family in cults, and no one's talking about it because the last thing you want to do is say, hey, my family member got roped into a cult. They're part of this thing. Who talks about that? And it goes back to what you were saying before. We're lacking that connection and communication. No one's communicating about the deep, important things anymore. So people don't know how prevalent this issue is, but it's so prevalent here.
Oh, well, that's why it's important that you're bringing it to the forefront, because they're still proliferating, and so it's important that there are people like you, that there are these cult survivors who are advocating on behalf of other survivors and also those who are still in the cult. So I've very much enjoyed you enlightening myself and my audience on this important topic, and it's been great to connect on air after almost 3 years.
I know, it's been so long. Thank you so much, Tim, for having me. I always enjoy, I do want to say, I enjoy our deep chats on this podcast. I feel like with other channels, you don't always get, a genuine feel for people and what they actually think, but I enjoy your transparency. So thank you for having me on here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, my show is what you see is what you get.
Yeah. No, me too. That's my method as well. So yeah, it's good.
All right, take care. Thank you so
too.
much.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, everybody, that concludes my discussion with Minny. Now, you can see some of her work writings in the Spectator magazine. So I will put the link to her author tag in the Spectator. And she also has, as I mentioned, she's still on Telegram as Septimus Kane. So I'll put that into the live chat as well. Obviously, I'm not going to screen share there because that'll show my private Telegram discussions there. Now on to the second half of the double feature of WilmsFront. So the Western Australian state election is on this Saturday, the 8th of March. Now, my guest is a law academic at Curtin University, Dr. Rocco Loiacono. He is the author of Deconstructing ScoMo. So that's how I had him as a guest on my show a number of years ago with Augusto Zimmerman, who I've had on the show many times as well. And he's also a Sky News contributor. And he is also a Spectator contributor as well. I'll put his links into the live chat as well. The Spectator, you have to be a subscriber, though the Sky News articles are free at skynews.com.au. Now, I recorded it with him earlier today, so he is very busy, so we couldn't do the conversation live. So I will play my recording and then I'll come back to conclude this WilmsFront at the end.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Rocco, welcome back to WilmsFront.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the latest poll that we've got from the Western Australian state election is a news poll which has two-party preferred Labor government 56% to the Liberals 44%. Primary vote it's 42 for the Labor government, 32 for the Liberals, and 3% for the Nationals. So a lot of the commentary that has been beamed over to us on the East Coast from the West is that it's going to be a comfortable re-election for the Cook Labor government, though you're on the ground there. So it's obviously there's all the local media covering it, but you're seeing all the corflutes and the candidates everywhere. What's the feeling on the ground?
Oh, look, talking to candidates and talking to people, there definitely is an appetite for change. The question is whether the Liberals and the Nationals have done enough to convince voters to make that change. The economy is going well at the surface. If we didn't have the resources sector, I think we'd be in a bit of trouble. And for all the flows of money that are going into government coffers, government debt is forecast to increase from $33 billion, which, by the way, was the level it was in 2017 when the ALP came into office, to $39 billion over the forward estimates, so to 28-29. And hospital ramping is 5 to 6 times worse than it was when the ALP came to office. Police are resigning in record numbers. There are cost of living pressures. Taxes and charges are increasing faster than the rate of inflation. So there are a lot of reasons to be upset, but whether it's enough for the Liberals and Nationals to convince the voters that it's time for a change, I think people are yet to be. At the moment, what I'm seeing there'll be a swing back. They're coming off such a low base. There will be a swing back, but given that they're going to have to climb the proverbial mountain, a change of government at this stage is hard to see.
They are coming off such a low base. Well, the Liberal Party in Western Australia. So the McGowan slide, obviously during the peak of COVID, it was quite extraordinary that the Liberal Party and the lower house was reduced to a rump of 2, 7 in the lower house. And in fact, the Nationals were made the official opposition. And so David Honey was the Liberal leader. And then there was the spill of two MPs and Libby Metham became the leader, and then there's been a change in the Nationals leadership. Mia Davies is going to contest the new seat of Bullwinkle at the federal election, and Shane Love is the new Western Australian Nationals leader. And then, of course, the biggest change, Mark McGowan retiring because he was tired and passing over.
He's now got 5 jobs. He's so tired.
Exactly. Handing over to, well, it was a stitch-up. A factional stitch up to Roger Cook. Now, the impression that I get of Roger Cook is that he hasn't got the charisma that Mark McGowan did, but he's, as I've said, just mentioned in the polls, he's still holding a comfortable lead for the government.
Yeah. Look, the thing with McGowan wasn't well liked by his colleagues either. I mean, back before after the 2013 election, in fact, they actually tried to replace him with Stephen Smith, but it just happened that they couldn't get themselves organised, and they stuck with McGowan. In the end, the Barnett government proved so unpopular that McGowan surfed in, and as they say, the rest is history. But look, the thing with Roger Cook is that he was health minister. I mean, leaving aside all the COVID nonsense, and he was health minister over that, but he was the health minister who's presided over the record hours of ambulance ramping, right? And he was deputy premier, and he was the health minister who presided over what the WA Auditor General called for want of, I think she said it was the most lack of regard for spending of public money, with total absence of preparation over the handing out of rat tests. They were budgeted at $3 million, end up costing $500 million, all these rat tests, which ended up having to be thrown away. So the question is, why isn't the government on the nose? It should be on the nose. But see, the thing is, over this time, the Liberals, and we go back to 2021 when they tried to outflank the Labor Party on the left with green policy by saying, "Oh, look, we'll shut down coal-fired power stations quicker than the Labor Party."
Yeah, is that Kirkup?
Yeah, and look, the energy policy is better, but it's still trying to walk both sides of the street. And the Liberals are still, I mean, they've come down hard on some good issues, or have got some decent policies on several issues, such as no men and women's sports and things like that.
Yes, that's
but on things like,
she's taken a stand.
Yeah. But on things like The Voice, I mean, Libby Metham was for The Voice, and then she changed her mind when the polls were going the other way. And the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, which the Liberal National Parties actually voted for, it wasn't until that they saw that it was just going to be the debacle that it was, and the unprecedented attack on private property rights it was, that they started changing their minds. Now, people don't forget that. The flip-flopping around, as I say, people don't forget that. So as bad, I mean, you would know, being in Victoria, as bad as a government is, people will re-elect a bad government unless they're giving a convincing case for change. And yes, they've made some strides on some policy issues, but whether it's enough, as I say, it's whether these flip-flop issues or flip-flopping on these issues might remain in people's minds. And think, well, you know, you've got to come down on things like that from the start on principle. And I think we saw that in the Voice referendum when Peter Dutton came down pretty much on the get-go on principle, and he was rewarded for it. And sometimes I think those lessons haven't been learned.
Yeah, that's an important context that you raise, because obviously it's been well received in the East that Libby Metham has said we're going to reverse self-ID in WA. We're going to ban puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for under 16. And it's been to us here in the East, and it's like, wow, that's refreshing. Wish Peter Dutton was like that. But the history is that the WA Liberals haven't been haven't stood up in the culture wars until right about recently.
That's right, and people, as I say, people don't forget that. And what did John Howard once say? You can't fatten a pig on market day. Similar kind of scenario here. You've got to come down on principle on these cultural issues from the start rather than play catch up.
And obviously, Libby Metham, she's also dealing with what I'd term a shadow opposition leader in the Mayor of Perth and Liberal candidate for Churchlands, Basil Zempalis, who we all know here in the East from, well, us Victorians know from his Channel 7 AFL commentary, and he was also commentator on the Olympics. He's been a
and the tennis.
figure. Yeah, tennis as well. He's been a media figure in Perth for over 20 years. And obviously he's very, being a media personality himself, he's a very polished media performer. And he also, when he was a Mayor of Perth, he took on, wanted to be sort of the maverick mayor, and took on the Albanese government over its flip-flopping of Australia Day, saying, oh, we have no plans to change Australia Day, but we're going to let local councils decide to cancel it. Yeah. So he's definitely made a name for himself on political principle as well. But what's your view on him? Is there what is the Basil political philosophy, do you think?
Look, I don't. I've only met Basil Zempalis a couple of times personally, so I don't know him all that well. Like I've met him a couple of times, so personally, I don't know them all that well. So what I will say is both of them are prepared to sit down and listen to you when you put a point to them. The thing about Basil is because of his profile, he's instantly recognisable, and he has obviously that polished way, as you were saying, of speaking and of getting a message across. And I've heard the man talk publicly several occasions, and when he's speaking, the room is listening. And he was also on radio. He was also a breakfast radio host as well, in addition to his TV commitments. So he's very well known. And the Labor Party, in fact, were, and still are, still scared of him because they've got him alongside Libby Metham on their attack ads. And they've been attacking him left, right and centre. But as with a lot of mudslinging, it really hasn't worked, because there was an exit poll that came out in the West Australian, I think a week or two ago, that had him at, and look, it's off a small sample, so as with all these things, you should take them carefully, but that had him at 70% of first preference votes. So I don't think there was ever any issue of him holding his seat. Look, we will never know if the Liberals had changed and done a Campbell-Newman type thing that they did in Queensland in 2012 and made him the leader from the outside and presumptive premier if the Liberals were to win the election. We'll never know that. But look, the fact that it took to the debate for Libby Metham to really start getting a message across and to get down and dirty, as they say. It's all about the recognisability and the perception, isn't it, a lot of the time? And you play that off against Zempalis, and he obviously would have had a lot more presence and a lot more recognition. And the fact that the Labor Party directed a lot of his attack ads at him, I think, shows just how worried they were about him. And the fact that the Liberals might have made him presumptive leader should they win. So we what is it? 2 days out from an election, it's hard to know now what the result would have been. But it's fair to say that they might have had a better chance of winning more seats, but we don't know.
I've heard Libby Metham speak, and she's not the best speaker, but when the talent pool is a rump, you've got to take the what's there. Although, of course, Anastasia Palaszczuk, when she was opposition leader, wasn't the best speaker, but he took the party from a van full of MPs into government. But the polls aren't suggesting that for Saturday. But talking about the mud that the Labor dirt machine is flinging at Basil, they tried really early on, where there was that hot mic at a press conference where they tried to make it seem that he was calling the Australian Open women's single tennis final the reserves match.
Yeah, and it turns out he was directing a comment at a journalist from another network, Michael Genovese, who was actually put on. Who wasn't actually covering the tennis. So he was, what Basil was saying was, well, you're on the reserves rather than actually covering the main event. And these kind of things, people have seen through that. As I say, it hasn't stuck. And people here are concerned about a lot of things. They're not worried about this nonsense and this mudslinging. They're concerned about power prices. They're concerned about cost of living, we've also, in the area not far from where I live, basically the local issues are the ones that are gaining the traction, rather than this kind of parallel universe that some of the politicians live in. It's the local issues that matter at the end of the day, and the candidates that I've been speaking to have been just focusing on those local issues. For example, not far from where near I live is the Burswood Crown Casino, and Roger Cook, at a time when hospitals are struggling and there's record ambulance ramping and service deliveries at the worst time that we can recall in modern history. He wants to put a racetrack there, and so it just shows that they're out of touch, and that those kind of issues are the ones that the candidates are focusing on and gauging traction, as trying to put the government as out of touch on the bread and butter issues.
I remember during the COVID era, because there was there was some argument that the reason that Mark McGowan wanted to keep COVID zero in Western Australia for as long as possible is because the health system already couldn't cope. I think there was this horrendous case of a little girl dying because they didn't detect properly
Yeah, and I'll just stop you there, because if you don't mind, because Roger Cook. Unfortunately, a similar kind of scenario happened under the previous coalition government, and Roger Cook was health spokesman at the time, and as well as saying that 1,000 ambulance ramping hours was a crisis, he said that no child would die under his watch in a hospital waiting area, and he was the health minister when that actually happened. Right now, a person with even a half decent person would have resigned after that. So. The fact that and to get back to your point about COVID zero, there's no way the hospitals were struggling with a flu outbreak, with the 2018 flu outbreak, which I think was one of the worst on record. Let alone, they wouldn't. There's just no way they would have coped with anything resembling anything greater than that, which is of course why Mark McGowan took the COVID zero route. And was rewarded for it.
And I remember there was a hospital roof that actually collapsed, and it was sort of a metaphor for what was happening to the West Australian health system at the time.
Hospital roof collapsed. New software I think there was software to record patients' data. It was crashed. It was just been an absolute schmozzle. Everywhere you can look, on every measure. This Labor government is starting to resemble Victoria's Labor government.
Yeah, it does. And what's their excuse? Because they're not broke like our government.
No, not at all. I mean, look, they wanted to close. They wanted to take away some level crossings, which is fine. I got no issue with that. But to do that, they've built this bridge, and they wanted to extend the railway network, which is fine. But it's $12 billion over budget. and 3 years behind schedule.
Yeah, that's even
It's like the
worse
suburban
than
road
our
you've got in Melbourne. It's
metro
becoming a
tunnel.
bottomless pit of money. And the thing that the Liberals, I don't think, have managed to capitalise on is the white-hot anger that was present during the time of those cultural heritage laws. A poll came out in the West Australian after, I think it was September of 23.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the Liberals were if had an election been held that weekend, Labor was gone. And they just haven't managed to capitalise on that.
Well, Roger Cook did basically, well, it's called doing a Peter Beattie, saying we got this wrong. I apologise for all of the anxiety that it caused. And it seemed to, well, it didn't save the voice referendum, but it certainly saved him in the polls. Now, the West Australian Liberal Party not only has a celebrity candidate, but also a celebrity state president in Caroline de Russo. I mean, she's been prominent on Sky News Australia for many years, where you're a online contributor, and obviously she's very into the culture wars as well, very combative. We've obviously had a sort of celebrity, a Liberal president here for many years in Michael Kroger, though he hasn't been since 2018. What's the sort of, is she prominent in the campaign?
Well, I don't think. Look, I mean, I don't think she's definitely the campaign director. That's Sam Morgan. Look, and look, she's involved in the campaign, no doubt about it. And I'm sure she does a lot of the strategy.
She does the job for nothing.
Yeah. Look, and you know, whether this campaign will be a success can only be judged on the amount of seats that will be won. So once we know on Saturday night what the result is, depending on how many seats they won, we'll know whether this campaign has been successful. I think that's the only measure you can take on whether this is a good or a bad thing. Look, there definitely needed to be a clean out. There definitely needed to be a clean out of some of the, and there still needs to be. There are some people in there who I just don't understand why they're in the Liberal Party, other than time-serving, personal aggrandisement, that kind of thing.
Well, we've got plenty of dead wood in our Liberal Party here.
Yeah, and a lot of them in the upper house. I mean, we had Peter Collier, who's actually standing down at this election, when there was talk of maybe Basil Zemplis being the presumptive leader. The candidate, the Liberal candidate, given there are so many of them, I think there are only 10 people in the parliament. Only 10 people in the parliament for the Liberal Party. So you've got 50 or so candidates, and 10 people in the parliament. And Peter Collier, the candidate, said, well, look, in these extraordinary circumstances, shouldn't we have a say as to who the leader should be taking us to the election? And Peter Collier, who, as I say, is standing down at the election and has absolutely no interest in this, said, oh, no, get stuffed. It's the people in the parliament that make the decision. Now, Peter Collier, as an education minister, I don't think, he's one of these parliamentarians that you can't really chalk up a huge achievement to his name. I mean, I'm sure you can name some in Victoria. Yeah, as I say, time servers, and very comfortable, just not trying to do too much, not trying to rock the boat kind of thing.
Just want the title,
Yeah.
Now, Roger Cook has been in Anthony Albanese's ear clearly in the lead up to the election. Look, don't ditch this federal environmental protection authority. Roger Cook is well, Albanese also wants to retain all the seats in Western Australia to offset the losses that are probably going to come here in Victoria and New South Wales. Although there's been obviously a Trump threatening tariffs on Australia that is bound to affect Western Australia's economy into the future. And Roger Cook decided to put his foot in that by calling JD Vance a knob, though sort of said, yeah, well, he immediately said, I'm allowed one unprofessional moment. But the there could be trouble ahead for the mining industry.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the Labor Party is no friend of the mining industry, despite Mark McGowan being cosy with some key mining figures. But the mining industry came out against, thanks to Gina Rinehart, the cultural heritage laws and the voice eventually. Thanks to Gina Rinehart, the mining industry realised some
Peter
of them
Garrett
didn't.
hasn't helped Labor this week.
That's right.
Slagging off Gina Rinehart.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's the way they operate, because it's the old look over there, straw man type thing. Look, a government seeking a third term should stand on its record, right? Now, this government has no real record to speak of if you actually look at what it's supposed to do. And I've enumerated, hospitals, law and order, you name it, cultural heritage. I mean, and we talk about Cook being in Albanese's ear over environmental laws. I mean, he didn't stand up to Albanese when they decided they wanted to get rid of the live sheep trade, and there are signs all over here about that too. There are lots of reasons not to vote for the ALP, which is why it resorts to this kind of infantile strategy of insulting people.
And they've had a go, the Labor Dirt Unit, at a couple of the Liberal candidates for some colourful comments that they've said on social media, such as the Kimberley Liberal candidate Darren Spackman, and also there's the Albany Liberal candidate Thomas Bruff. So I guess they're trying to feed into, look, the Liberals are not ready, they're still a rabble.
Yeah,
that's their strategy.
Yeah, and it's all about experience. I mean, all the campaign ads about the experience of the Cook government, and the Liberals had never been in government, never held a ministry. But as Paul Murray, the former editor of the West Australian, pointed out, well, Roger Cook was actually parachuted into the parliament, straight into a shadow cabinet role, without ever being in the parliament, without ever holding a cabinet position back in 2013. And of course, as you said earlier, it was a union stitch up to make him premier. So, these kind of attacks often fall flat when you actually look at the people who are making them, and they're hypocritical at the end of the day.
I think WA election night, it could deviate from the script, which I think that you've alluded to. Thank you so much for providing us with your local expertise before the big election day, and we shall see if Albanese, well, he probably wanted to call the election on the Sunday, though of course we've got the cyclone up north, which we're hoping that everyone up there stays safe. But Anthony Albanese, he wanted to be up on stage with Roger Cook, but that's obviously not going to happen now. No,
and I'm not sure whether the state would want the feds here anyway, considering the Albanese government here. There's, as I say, because of the banning of the live sheep trade and other things, whether the Roger Cook would actually want anything to do with Albanese. I think he'd want to keep him away.
Although I'm talking about at the Victory Party.
Pardon?
I was talking about at the Victory Party, what they hope is the Victory Party.
Yeah, well, look, the only reason Albanese want to attend a party here is if he could get some reflective glow, that's for sure.
Oh, thank you again, Rocco, I know that you're very busy, and so thank you for your time. And of course, your columns, they're free to view on skynews.com.au. Though over at The Spectator, you need to have a subscription to it, but of course they're just as great.
Thanks very much, Tim. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and let's see what tomorrow brings. As I say, the polls are pointing to a landslide, but there, as I say, there are a lot of local issues that that are at play, and we'll see whether they're enough to swing the pendulum.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
And we are back live. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's WilmsFront Double Feature, even though there was some technical issues, particularly with the beginning of the playback of my interview with Rocco. It's the first time that on the Restream platform that I've played back a pre-recorded interview. So there's always a bit of a lag there, but I think that got through it, got through that technical issue, and we should have a smooth running for our West Australian election night live stream, which will be beginning at 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, which is 6 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time when the polls close over in Western Australia, because there's a 3-hour time difference when us over here in the southeastern states are on daylight savings. So at the beginning of the coverage, I'll be joined by Stephen Berry of the Mr. Berry Show, and also by Kyle Kutazi, a former state executive member of the New South Wales Liberal Party, and also the go-to lawyer of a choice if a trans athlete has taken out an AVO against you. So that the election night live stream for Western Australia will be on the Unshackled channels. So that will be at the very least on the Unshackled YouTube channel, and also on the Unshackled Rumble channel. And now remember, I cannot do any of this without your support. So please consider taking out a premium membership on the unshackled.net/membership. So you can take out a $5 bronze per month membership, or $50 per year, or silver for $10 per month, $100 per year, or gold $25 per month, $250 per year, and platinum $50 per month, $500 per year. So the unshackled.net is where all of our Unshackled articles are still published. It is over in Substack. That's got our Unshackled Productions archive, and also where I send out all the email alerts for upcoming Unshackled productions, as well as my own and the Unshackled's socials over on Telegram and X and Gab, all the mostly free speech platforms, while Gab is pretty much entirely free speech. So you can also support us at the unshackled.substack.com/subscribe. So there is a monthly membership of $5 per month, an annual subscription $50, or a founding member for $500 per year. Now, this week I was back on Reality Check Radio in New Zealand with another Wilms report. So on Paul Brennan's breakfast program. So I will put the link into that in the live chat as well. So I'm on fortnightly this year. And there will also be another report from Tiger Mountain with Richard Wollstonecroft later this week as well. So thank you so much for your company and patronage, including in the comments. Make sure that on both the WilmsFront and the Unshackled YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble channels, you are subscribed. Give a thumbs up, like, comment below to all the videos, because it always helps with the algorithm. And I'll see you on Saturday night, 9 p.m. Melbourne time, which is 6 p.m. Perth time, for another election night live stream. So stay safe, stay sane, stay free, stay optimistic, because I think that despite some of the grimness that we report, we are making progress. So good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.